If you enjoy this content, please like and comment to feed the algorithm god. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Oh, I love opportunities like this. Let's talk alternate history and let's have some fun together. In the mid-1950s, the space race began between the United States and the Soviet Union. The U.S. intended to launch its first satellite into space, but the USSR stepped in and stated, "Nay, we shall be the first to do so." And in October of 1957, the USSR did it. They launched Sputnik 1, the first Earth-orbiting satellite in history. Not even 1 month later, the USSR launched Sputnik 2 with a K9 named Laika on board, the first living organism to orbit the Earth. In January of 1958, the U.S. achieved its own successful launch with a satellite called Explorer 1. Now, let the alternate timeline begin. That same year, 1958, the Soviet Union launched another satellite in secret, the Verona 1. It fell into orbit around Earth-Moon Lagrange Point 2 and began transmitting telemetry from deep space. The Soviet Union was securing their lead in the space race. But in 1960, something happened. The Verona 1 stopped transmitting. The USSR sent a small crew out to investigate and repair, but they couldn't find anything wrong with the satellite. Soviet leadership ordered them to crack open the Verona 1, and something set upon the cosmonauts: a life form. There were no survivors. The footage was buried by the USSR and dubbed a state secret. But after 2 years, the threat was deemed too dangerous to be contained alone. And in a testament to just how alternate of a timeline this is, the USSR began to communicate and work with the United States during John Fitzgerald Kennedy's presidency. Publicly, the two nations announced a cooperation towards a mission to reach the moon, while in secret, a program called Kletka was created, an endeavor to contain and study these non-terrestrial beings. But this alliance was short-lived. In our timeline, President Kennedy was killed in Dallas, Texas in 1963. But in this timeline, JFK didn't die that day. He survived the assassination attempt. And when he returned to Washington, D.C., he returned emboldened. Relations between the U.S. and the USSR were never really quite stable. There was always a schism. Under JFK's order, the Kletka program was wrested away from the USSR, brought fully under the control of the United States. Relations between the U.S. and the USSR became cold once again, and Project Axiom began. A moon base was created to mine out raw materials needed for the construction of a space station. And in this alternate timeline, the United States did not engage in the Vietnam War. The space race brought economic collapse to the Soviet Union. Over time, and as presidents passed, the U.S. space program became more and more unpopular with politicians and the Pentagon. It was hard to financially justify something so expensive when there was no perceivable threat. A space station was built around the Verona 1 satellite, which held the extraterrestrial life, and by 1978 it was complete. A full research and development site to study the creature now called the Typhon. But in 1984, the Typhon broke containment, an unfortunate incident that resulted in the deaths of an entire American research crew. With this volatile tragedy and the turning of public opinion against the space program back on Earth, the United States government quietly began to withdraw from Project Axiom, and by 1998, it was completely shut down. But private interests began to eye the old moon mining bases and the abandoned space station. In 2025, TranStar Industries was founded in America. Though many high-ranking members of TranStar held their positions anonymously, the chairman of the board of directors was a man named William Yu, a Chinese neuroscientist. His wife, Catherine Yu, a German-born businesswoman, also served on the board. Their two children, Alex and Morgan Yu, also went on to serve in high-ranking positions within the company. Immediately following the founding of TranStar Industries, efforts to purchase the long-defunct space station and the moon mining bases were kicked off, and in 2030, the purchase was finalized. The remnants of Project Axiom now belonged to TranStar. Catherine and William Yu's eldest child, Alex Yu, became CEO over TranStar. Their second child, Morgan Yu, took the position of vice president. Both of the Yu children were were heads of research as well, extremely talented in their fields, almost as if groomed for success from a very young age. The once defunct space station was rebuilt and modernized, now called Talos 1. The eldest child, Alex Yu, traveled to Talos 1 where studies were underway to understand these non-terrestrial beings called Typhon. TranStar began to spearhead research into a new technology referred to as neuromods. But before we talk intent, let's discuss how neuromods are made. You see, a human test subject, typically a Soviet quote-unquote criminal, quote-unquote, or an American death row inmate, are placed into a cell, where a Typhon species called a mimic is placed into. Now, how mimics pull this off isn't actually known for certain, but a mimic transforms. It imitates what's around it. It could do this by perhaps going into an alternate dimension and displacing an item from there, or perhaps it emits a psychoactive field that just makes it look like the item to the observer. Maybe it changes its molecular structure on command, or perhaps it's just something unexplainable with modern scientific knowledge. Magic, if you will. But anyways, a test subject is placed into a cell with a mimic. The mimic uses the flesh of the test subject to reproduce itself, violently killing the subject in the process. The reproduced mimics are then lured into a recycling field where they are turned into raw materials. Using a fabrication machine, these raw materials can be formed into the parts needed to build neuromods. How fun! Then, a person of interest, perhaps a scientist, a musician, a person of some skill or desired trait, is provided a brain scan, a mapping of the neural connections in their brain and their nervous system. The neuromod stores the neural mapping that creates a particular skill, and through a careful injection process, that mapping can be uploaded into the brain of another person. But just how is this injection done? Well, done just like this.
Step 1. Remove neuromod from vacuum-sealed container. Now, if you've never done this before, listen to the entirety of the instructions before you do this. You don't want someone to panic and then not know what to do next. Don't be an asshole. Alright, step 2. Press rubberized eye cup firmly against bony orbit of eye socket, and I mean firmly. You ever see a lobotomy? You don't want someone to lobotomize themselves because they wiggle and squirm. Step 3. Keep eye open. If you gotta get a nurse to hold someone in place and keep their eye open, then do it. If someone freaks out, then be an asshole. Better to restrain someone than let them destroy their eyelids and liquefy their eyeball, you know what I mean? Aight. Step 4. Depress orange release trigger and continue to hold neuromod against eye for 5 minutes. And don't guesstimate the time. I mean all 5 minutes. You don't want someone to leave your office with an IQ 20 points lower than when they came in. Don't be a lazy asshole. Step 5. Dispose of used neuromod in provided biohazard bag. Don't leave the dirty neuromods laying about like an asshole. If you got questions, don't ask me. I'm busy.
There are some who cannot accept neuromods, however. Some suffer from a condition called paraplexis, a neurological disorder that made the use of neuromods potentially lethal. The user would suffer slow weakening of muscles, distorted vision, difficulty breathing, and eventually death. But there was another aspect to neuromods that made it a technology not to be taken lightly. Should a neuromod be removed from a user after some use, all memories formed during that time would be lost, be it a few hours, a few days, weeks. It would revert the brain back to before the neuromod was installed. Aboard the Talos 1, a new form of research was undertaken, and it directly involved the Typhon. You see, there are many types of Typhon. There's the mimics that replicate, some of whom undergo metamorphosis to become weavers, which create other forms of Typhon, like the cystoids that detonate, the phantoms that are exceedingly fast and aggressive. There are poltergeists that stalk from the shadows, created when a phantom's birth is unsuccessful. Then the telepaths that dominate the minds of organic beings, and technopaths that control electronics and machinery. Then the behemoths, like the nightmares that hunt desired prey, and the apex, the largest of the Typhon and the most mysterious. But at least of the lesser Typhon, there are also subspecies of each group, and many abilities along with each. Some quite unique, some quite deadly, some nigh unexplainable. So just imagine if some of those abilities could be mapped into a neuromod. If we could harness them, achieve the next step in human evolution. Neuromods could easily make one smarter. Let them harness a skill that would take years to learn, open your body to more physical potential, extend the natural life cycle. But what if a human could act like a mimic, or physically move and control things, organic or not? Humans could become weapons, or the ultimate protectors, a human poltergeist. Just imagine the price tag that could be attached to those neuromods. Of all the Typhon neuromods, which one would you choose if you could only have one? Oh, and choose wisely. Think longevity. For 5 years, between 2030 and 2035, research on Talos 1 made remarkable strides towards this goal. But during those 5 years, what happened? Well, Alex Yu proved to be vicious in his convictions and self-confidence, a remarkably secretive and difficult man to work with, yet he got results. At about the midpoint in the research, in 2032, Alex Yu convinced his younger sibling, Morgan Yu, to come to Talos 1, to join him in the Typhon neuromod research taking place. Morgan Yu was still on Earth, working for TranStar. Right before Morgan's departure from Earth, their first neuromod was installed, and in 2032, both of the Yu children were united on Talos 1 to spearhead the research, and I imagine their parents to be quite proud. Well, at least their mother, probably. Parental relationships can be complicated, can't they? Anyways, now, let's talk. Because knowing what we do about the nature of the events that we experience as Morgan Yu, well, things here can be subjected to opinion. The details can get a little suspect depending on what you piece together, who you trust, what blanks you happen to fill in. So if you think things played out differently in this time span, let me know what you think happened. Because that's part of what makes this game so gosh dang special. There's many ways to experience it, and there's many paths to choose, and I'm not going to pretend to know the definitive truth of what takes place once Alex begins using Morgan. But this is what I pieced together, and let me know what you discovered. In the final months of the year 2034, Morgan Yu, the younger of the two siblings, agreed to be a human test subject for the rapidly developing Typhon neuromod program. With their older brother leading the way, why wouldn't Morgan trust him to take care of them? Morgan did this fully knowing that after the Typhon neuromods were removed, all of their memories developed during that time would be wiped away. Shortly before the trials began in October, Morgan reprogrammed an operator that they called October to help them at a later time should future Morgan's memory and mind be completely degraded. It was a backup plan should Alex prove to be a poor keeper of their younger sibling, and in case there was an emergency involving the Typhon. October would inform future Morgan of a way to kill all the Typhon aboard Talos 1 if the situation arose. Morgan didn't trust that Alex would do anything other than completely destroy all of Talos 1 and pass the blame instead of fessing up to a tragedy of failure. But October could tell the future Morgan of a way to detonate a Null wave transmitter big enough to kill every Typhon on board, while leaving all other life and structures intact. Once the trials began, over and over again, Morgan Yu had Typhon neuromods installed, tested, and removed. And it didn't take long for Morgan to start changing. Something called personality drift came into effect. Morgan became erratic, sometimes experiencing outbursts, not the same Morgan that they once were. Episodes of anger began to take place at directors' meetings. Crew members aboard Talos 1 began to notice that Morgan Yu was not acting rationally. Head of security Sarai Elazar, also called Sarah Elazar, also began eyeballing Morgan Yu. She was quite bothered that Morgan was disappearing into the neuromod division of the station for days at a time and started investigating what was going on there in secret. By December, Morgan Yu's memory had become Swiss cheese. The stress of the tests were also destroying their mind. Another operator was reprogrammed, this one called December. Morgan Yu programmed December to function much the same as October, to act as a guide for a future Morgan. But this time, their directive was more dire, more chaotic. To accompany Morgan's decaying mind, December would help future Morgan get their brother's private escape pod, where they would flee the space station and return to Earth to warn the world of the Typhon threat aboard Talos 1 and the experiments taking place there. And then the following month, a major escalation occurred. A frantic and frightened Morgan Yu broke away from the research sector amidst a break from reality and hid away on Talos 1. Morgan got another operator and began reprogramming. This one would be called January. January would also act as a guide to future Morgan, but January would help Morgan Yu destroy Talos 1. If the situation became dire, it would kill everything on board, but the Typhon threat would be eliminated and all research wiped out. It would stop this technology in its tracks, perhaps a safer choice for the future of mankind. Burn it all to the ground. Morgan was captured, putting it bluntly, and secretly returned to the simulation area of the Neuromod Research Division. The operator called January began collecting resources around Talos 1 for Morgan Yu, should they ever escape. Morgan's original Neuromod, the one installed back on Earth, was taken out, reverting their memory back to the year 2032, right before their departure from Earth. All Morgan experienced over and over again was one day marked March 15th, 2032. Morgan would wake up on a stage made to look like their apartment back on Earth, and they would go through the superficial process of leaving their home, getting aboard a private helicopter, and reporting to a TranStar testing center where they would meet their brother Alex, who gave a familiar brotherly pep talk, and then the testing would begin. Now, something happened, and from here we enter extreme spoiler territory. We're going to jump right into the gritty of it, and I don't generally give a warning, as if you're here you've probably experienced the base tale in some way, but if you would like to play this out yourself, now is the time to pause. Because here we go. If you're here, you know. What we experience as the player is carried out within a simulation, within the looking glass. We are a Typhon that has received neuromods to give them a human experience, to develop empathy and understanding of what humanity is, because somehow, if Alex Yu is to be believed at least, the Typhon made it to Earth. Our story is taking place some years after 2035. Morgan Yu is presumably long since dead, along with most of humanity and our homeworld. It's all a big test to see if a bridge can be built between the Typhon and the humans. More on this in a bit, but herein lies a bit of a pickle that we have to acknowledge before moving on. The brief history that we've been given of the experiences of Morgan Yu and the events that we are soon to discuss have all been curated to us within the Looking Glass simulation that Alex Yu put together. And Alex Yu has a goal: convert us, the Typhon, into a human ally. Now, if we start picking everything apart and view everything as a lie, it degrades the value of the stories being told. Perhaps we can trust Alex Yu to keep the integrity of the tale. Perhaps he's allowing us to experience the basics of the truth so that we can make our own choices. So, let's play along. Let's have our adventures. Let's collect our data. Let's share our results. Rather than stick to a canon storyline, let's have fun. Let's dance together. Play with me. Because I feel like I could relive this simulation several times over and over and still not uncover all the possible paths and choices that I could take. Or, given different contexts, I wouldn't make the same choice twice. What sort of human-akin Typhon did you turn out to be? But back to the story, assuming that we can believe the curated story of Alex Yu, in March of 2035, the Typhon mimics being used for research aboard Talos 1 broke containment. Now, this could have happened any number of ways, and I'd love to hear what you discovered that sways your opinion. I think that January released them. January's first task, as assigned by Morgan Yu, was to find a way to free them from the simulation cycle that they were in, and releasing the Typhon would certainly do that. Or perhaps it was pure happenstance, given what we know about January and her directive. It's awful convenient, isn't it? Create a crisis. Release Morgan Yu. Ooh, spicy. The Typhon mimics broke out a few months after January was created on Talos 1, and everything very quickly fell into chaos. A number of things could have happened. All we know for sure is that Alex Yu did not die on Talos 1. If Talos 1 was not destroyed during the Typhon infestation, then he found safety on the ship. Or he made it off of Talos 1 in his private escape pod with the brain scans of a few key crew members and his precious Typhon research as humanity was consumed by the Typhon. It's hard to say, it might not even matter in the end. If Talos 1 remains, it's a graveyard full of technology and Typhon. So, what do you think happened on Talos 1? I think that it was overrun when January breached containment. The crew was slaughtered. I think Morgan Yu made it to Alex Yu's private escape pod, enacted the December operator's plan of fleeing, and inadvertently took the Typhon to Earth with them, while Alex Yu hid away aboard Talos 1 and began researching a way to change his fate, death at the hands of the Typhon. But that's just a theory. The Typhon themselves are not intrinsically malicious in their behavior, it's just what they are. It's hard to not attach human concepts to the Typhon. It's just in their nature to attack, consume, and destroy. They lack mirror neurons, the ability to understand and empathize with the suffering of other living creatures. Very, very frightening for us, we fragile and weak-bodied things that we are. It's not fair to call them evil, but vicious threat would be a fair title. Regardless of intent or lack thereof, the Typhon destroy human life indiscriminately. They are indeed worthy of fear. In the safety of a hidden-away office in a place unknown, Alex Yu begins putting together the simulation, created from the memories of their dead sibling, Morgan Yu. Alex Yu uploads the digitized consciousness of a few important Talos 1 crew members into proxies, into operators, in a very Soma-esque manner. Alex uploads the mild-mannered neuroscientist Deo Igwe, the former love interest of Morgan and chief systems engineer Michaela Ilyushin, the head of security Sarah Elazar, and finally the abrasive head of information technology Danielle Sho. These are the minds that will watch what takes place in the Looking Glass simulation that Alex Yu will prepare. For 5 years, the researchers aboard Talos 1 had tried over and over to put Typhon abilities into humans, but never had they tried instead putting what makes us human into the Typhon. There were hints of interest in this before the fall of Talos 1, something that was called Project Cobalt in the beginning, but the pursuit of it was blocked by Alex Yu, seen as a waste of time, an idea and project that was not his own, therefore not worthy of the resources. But in the future, this becomes Alex Yu's goal within this Looking Glass simulation. Earth is lost, humanity is on its final leg. What is needed is a bridge between the Typhon and humanity, for one of them to understand what it means to be human, to really understand us, to feel empathy, and to comprehend how we think, an ally, and perhaps a peacemaker between these two very different life forms, or in the very least, good data for how to proceed against the Typhon as a whole. And it takes some years to do so. Alex Yu grays a bit around the ears, his face is a little more wrinkled and drooped. His tone seems soft and humbled by the time the simulation is ready. A Typhon candidate is captured, neuromodded with human traits, and placed into the once life of Alex Yu's younger sibling, Morgan. The 4 operators, Deo Igwe, Michaela Ilyushin, Sarai Elazar, and Danielle Sho will stand in observation of this Typhon's choices and will assist in passing judgment upon what we do. Now, we get to see how the events play out on Talos 1 based on our decisions, the kind of person, so to speak, that we choose to be. In my case, I wanted to be a lovely female Morgan Yu. Just look at those freckles. And presumably, Morgan is waking up just like any other day? Monday, March 15th, 2032. There's no reason for Morgan to question this. Of course, it's a day just like any other. With the memories of Morgan Yu's life, of course, all of this should make sense. If it doesn't, then just go along with it, right? This is the memory of Morgan Yu before things all went to hell, when their mind was Swiss cheese. It is a cruel cycle, but upon initial viewing, it doesn't really seem that cruel, does it? And why wouldn't it be the year 2032? The alarm clock just said that it was the year 2032. I'm convinced, really, genuinely. This game has stuck in my brain. I believed it was March 15th, 2032, and I did the typical things that I do. I started playing with the faucets. throwing things around, going through emails, learning names. That's what Alex wants. Morgan acted exactly as was expected. Like a fresh set of eyes, taking in the world around them, not recognizing the truth of it all, accepting it all at face value. Brother Alex is calling. We have to report to a helicopter. We need to go take some tests. It's what Morgan is told to do, so it's what Morgan does. And the helicopter ride, it's really nice. It's scenic, there's music, it's luxurious, it's a great way to start the day. And Brother Alex, well, he seems like a really nice brother. Maybe that's what he wanted first impressions to be, so that later he would be more convincing of a presence. Maybe it's all just a form of manipulation. But anyways, he seems like he really cares about what Morgan is doing. He seems really proud, so Morgan must like Alex. And the tests, well, Morgan doesn't really do so well. It seems like this particular Morgan Yu has a bit of a resistance to authority and doesn't really comply when ordered around, and might be a little intentionally obstinate to cover up the fact that they don't really know how to properly use their limbs yet. And there was a lot of people chatting in Morgan Yu's ear that morning, so she was a little bit distracted. But then a taste of what's to come. By this point, the day the Typhon broke free, the mimics are already hiding in plain sight. Before the chaos of capturing or killing a mimic begins, Morgan is sedated now. To impress upon you just how perfectly this simulation plays it off, I offer myself as tribute. This is a pure, blind experience of what it is to be a Typhon in the year 2021, while not knowing that I, Morgan, was actually a Typhon, not knowing that the world around me was a simulation. Press the any key. Where's the any key?
Hey, Morgan, wake up.
Hi.
You're burning daylight.
Oh, Morgan. Okay. Wait, was that other guy named you? Wait, can I pick that up? I can. Oh, nice. Wait, am I misremembering that in my brain? He was like a big heavyset dude, right? Ready? We're gonna break it. Ready? Kobe! Oh. Nice suit though, I like that red. Probably looks really good on you too. Red and black is such a good combo. Can I leave? Jammed. Oh, other side. My bad. I've never been in a helicopter before. Cool.
Everyone's eager to see what you're capable of, Dr. Yu.
Huh. Well, I am the protagonist.
Should I change position?
That's what he said. He'd been trying
Morgan!
He is a big guy.
Finally!
You're my brother? Really?
I'll see you after.
Yeah, nothing is gonna go wrong. Oh. This box?
Wonderful. Hey, Morgan.
Sit.
Listen carefully. I'd like you to do your best to hide in this room.
Got it. I got this. Ready?
I'm sorry, can someone please explain to me? Is my coffee? It's empty. Oh my God!
Clean it up. I'm on my way.
What? Our brother wouldn't betray us, right? What is that in her brain? 6 emails, huh? All right. No, our best friend. Oh, you're not my best friend. What is this, Truman Show? Goofs aside, I, meaning Morgan, approached this world exactly as I was supposed to without even knowing it. No understanding of who I was or where I was. Character names didn't have any context beyond brother, doctor, pilot, best friend, etc. And in the case of Typhon Morgan's story and character development, that makes the player part of the game on a deeper level. It goes beyond basic tutorials and story dumps. If approached with a willingness to engage, to listen and question, then you truly can be the Typhon candidate and not even know it. Now, the operator January contacts Morgan as soon as she exits her staged apartment, and though January is a soothing voice and a guide, unbeknownst to Morgan for now, January's directive is that Talos 1 is to be completely destroyed. No one escapes. But January is the only guide that Morgan has for now, and first things first, get Morgan out of the Neuromod division alive. The place is really starting to overrun with lesser Typhon, and all Morgan gets at first is a wrench and a glue cannon. And in this case, Morgan Yu is just not that great at stealth or planning or aiming or hacking. It's just kind of a wild trek, headed by a Morgan Yu that tries to push the next button on a computer screen by repeatedly hitting it with a wrench. The bodies of the Talos 1 crew are littered about the station. Security doors are locked down, parts of the ship are completely compromised, and the only friend that Morgan has at this point is the operator January, telling her to get to her old office off the main lobby. A message is awaiting Morgan there, a message from Morgan Yu's past, which we are to assume is our past. There's no reason not to believe that it is. And through this looking glass message, Morgan is told a little bit about what is going on, at least in regards to her memory and a plan that must be carried out. But Alex Yu interrupts the message. We cannot know how Alex Yu actually approached the Morgan Yu situation back in 2035, but at least within the simulation, he seems tired, apologetic, and asks Morgan to just stay there and wait for him. But with no context for anything, January's plan to bring the servers back up so that we can see the rest of the message is far more appealing than just sitting around waiting for someone that we've already learned to be suspicious of. At least since the whole simulated apartment thing, who knows what Alex Yu could actually want to do to us? And if he doesn't want us to see what's on that pre-recorded message, then we definitely need to see what's on the rest of that message. There are stories to be discovered in this place, complex relationships between people now dead, who didn't deserve what happened to them. There are phantoms about, carrying the names of some who were lost, consumed by the Typhon, joining their ranks in name. Though at department terminals, there are crew manifests that can be accessed which show that there are still survivors aboard the ship not yet claimed by the Typhon. Not all is lost. There are still some who can be saved. But those are choices to be made later. By the time Morgan has accomplished restoring the Looking Glass server, a few hours have passed and Alex Yu has not come to collect their sibling and explain himself. The rest of Morgan Yu's pre-recorded message is the January directive that she created in January of 2035, when she fled from the research department. It's the order to destroy Talos 1 and everything on it, including herself. And the operative January will aid in exactly that mission. It sounds like a noble sacrifice, one that will require a stiff upper lip unless you take into account all the lives still on board just trying to survive. January approaches this destructive goal as if it is the only solution to what is going on, but knowing what we do now, that's not really the whole truth, is it? Wink wink. The first seemingly official goal is to get the fabrication plans for an arming key hidden deep within deep storage by the past Morgan Yu, which requires detouring through the psychotronics department where the Typhon breach originated. Wow. And en route, something very interesting occurs, something with little context that makes things all the more confusing for Morgan. The operator December contacts her. December was created with the objective of getting a future Morgan Yu into their brother's private escape pod to flee from Talos 1, to get back to Earth and warn the planet of the Typhon threat and the research taking place on the station. It's the first indicator that perhaps there are choices to be made here. This doesn't have to end in fire and brimstone. Oh, how interesting. And in the psychotronics department, Alex Yu reappears on comms, asking what Morgan thinks they're doing in such a dangerous place, and then guiding Morgan towards a neuromod since they're going to be so reckless. He abandons his warning quite quickly. And here is yet another interesting choice that we're given, but with no context as to the risk or the consequences. Alex Yu tells Morgan to get this neuromod and to install a Typhon ability. Perhaps it's to protect this Typhon Morgan Yu, to help them along their simulated way, or perhaps it's to tempt and test them. Maybe this is exactly how things actually went down in the year 2035 between Alex and Morgan when Talos 1 fell into chaos, though I highly doubt that to be the case. But choosing to install neuromods with the abilities of the enemies that flood the ship will take this Typhon Morgan further from alignment with humanity, a choice to be made with almost no indication of the consequences for it at a later time. And in this case, Typhon Morgan Yu does not install a single Typhon neuromod. So, thus far in the story, are you siding with January? Are you hell-bent on destroying all of Talos 1? Or is December the one that you choose to follow? Get the escape pod key, get off the ship, and the simulation early, defy what January keeps harping on about in your ear. Later on, January will destroy December once the opportunity presents to shut the operator up, as Morgan is expressing just a little bit too much interest in just leaving the station. January intends to keep December from interfering in January's directive, but the choice of leaving Talos 1 to its own fate is still yours. But in this case, Typhon Morgan did not flee the ship. But suspicions and a disdain for the operator January were beginning to build. The constant questioning of choices and trying to force their own logics upon Morgan was tiresome from the beginning. But maybe this particular Morgan Eo is just has a hard time taking orders. Reaching the deep storage isn't made easy for Morgan. The main lift is offline and there's Typhon almost everywhere. It's a gauntlet of trouble through the guts and up into the lush garden area called the Arboretum, I think. And there are voices to be heard through the venture, side tasks to be accomplished, fights to encounter, loot to be obtained. So many throughout this journey that it's far too much to discuss here. We'd be here for hours. And there are other adventures to come, so we cannot dwell for too long. Though if your loyalties and planning shifted as you journeyed, if you cast your lot against January and or Alex Yu, what was the breaking point, I wonder? The Arboretum is a wonderful sight. Plant life abounds, a clear view into the cosmos. It's quiet and serene if you ignore the Typhon who have taken over the gardens. And the Typhon are beginning to quickly develop into higher forms. A telepath stalks the Arboretum. As time carries on, as Morgan Yu proceeds, the Typhon infestation will deepen. And they will evolve, I suppose is the word, into far more vicious and threatening forms. That telepath has still living crew members under its control within a greenhouse. Killing the telepath will release them from its grasp. There are still lives to be saved, should you choose to do so, or if you even can. But be careful. There are 2 volatile forms of Typhon phantoms lurking about here too, and they will attack on sight. But we gotta ask, so why aren't the main lifts working? Why did we need to come all the way up to the Arboretum to fix them? Is there a particular Typhon that you can recall that would perhaps impact electronics? Oh goodness, it seems that there's already a technopath on the loose, and these things will wreak absolute chaos on machinery and electronics within their vicinity. Thankfully, this Typhon Morgan is well prepared mentally for this fight and does not repeatedly try to call the malfunctioning lift to escape the fight early, and very, very much so remembers to use EMPs and electrical weaponry against it. In the end, all is well that ends well. And with that single technopath removed, the main lift of Talos 1 is operational once again. No more swimming through the guts of the ship to get around. And when returning to the Arboretum after this victory, Typhon Morgan Yu definitely did not panic and wildly flee from the nightmare. For 3 minutes, this massive Typhon threat will hunt Morgan. Run or fight, it's up to you, but I just want to say there is no shame in retreating for later victories. Unfortunately, the way into deep storage is locked, sealed closed by head of IT, Danielle Sho. The only way to get through the door is her voice, and admittedly, this Morgan never found Danielle Sho. Did you give up on Danielle? Did you happen to find her? Because I wonder what became of her in the end. Where was she hiding away? If I had just looked a little closer, could I have found Danielle? The best way to collect what is needed to open that door is to search the crew quarters of Talos 1 and to collect voice samples of Chief Danielle Sho strewn about the area. The Typhon truly rained hell over this place. Crew members were consumed, or perhaps worse, their minds were taken over. There are poltergeists, mimics, cystoid nests about. Phantoms are patrolling the halls. Mind-controlled crew members act erratically. It takes care not to harm them. There's still a person in there. Accidents can have dire consequences. Yes, I think that I popped David Branch's head like a cherry, and also yes, I'm very sorry about that. The crew area is a death trap now. Finding Danielle Show's voice samples is exceedingly dangerous, but on this journey, it is what Morgan Yu did. The Arboretum puts on display just how quick the Typhon infestation is happening. Something called coral decorates the foliage, a gold-threaded gas-like substance created by Typhon weavers. It doesn't harm Morgan. The coral is a neural network made up of the consciousnesses integrated into the Typhon, a form of communication between them, and a beacon for others. Given that at this particular moment, the nightmare is talking about hunting for Morgan, it is probably best to avoid the chaos of this place and make a run for deep storage. And there, Big Brother Alex Yu immediately locks Morgan in, claiming that she will be safe here, and when he is ready, he will meet with Morgan in his office. But we're certainly not sitting around waiting. This place is actually not safe. There are Typhon lurking about. The security doors have been mangled. Thanks, Alex, real safe. The fabrication plans for the self-destruct arm and key that Morgan Yu hid away in deep storage are in the central repository, a zero-gravity section of the ship that is infested with cystoid nests and coral. Another death trap. Oh, good fun. Thankfully, Typhon Morgan is an absolute pro at traversing zero-gravity spaces and maintaining spatial awareness. Thank you. Absolutely zero face tanking of cystoid bombs took place. Morgan needs to retrieve the computer drive floating around the repository to get access to the fabrication plans. Absolutely no problem. Chief Danielle Show does get in contact with Morgan Yu. She is not dead, at least, gosh, not yet. She asks Morgan to find a person that killed her once romantic partner, Abigail Foy, to do just one good thing and kill the person that took her away. Yeah, sorry about that, Chief Show. Typhon Morgan takes the way out that Danielle Show provides, but doesn't track down the killer of her former partner. I just kind of got a little sidetracked and things escalated. I mean, Morgan did. Morgan got sidetracked and things escalated. Sorry about that. Now, there is a brief moment of dream that Typhon Morgan experiences, a break in the simulation that lasts just for a few moments. This is the first time in the simulation that this Morgan has experienced it.
You're not what they say you are.
Can you hear us? Rejecting the new cell lines, biting them up like an antivirus.
The Typhon within this forming Morgan Yu is fighting against the humanity being injected into it, fighting it like it's a virus. But the body and mind of the Typhon Morgan does not break. It returns into the simulation, waking up in a container it used to leave deep storage. Sarai Sarah Elazar now contacts Morgan, who is traversing the exterior of Talos 1 in a suit, beckoning her to the cargo bay, where a group of survivors have taken shelter. But en route to the cargo bay, there's a call for help from the neuroscientist Deo Igwe. He had to seal himself into a cargo container after an incident in the cargo bay, which was then ejected from the station when the Typhon compromised the integrity of the bay. He has no extra oxygen, he has no spacesuit, and he only has a few more minutes until he begins to suffocate. Igwe begs for help in getting taken back onto the station, and in this particular adventure, Morgan Yu clumsily complies and saves the life of Deo Igwe. And who wouldn't? You wouldn't leave him, would you? You wouldn't open the container door in space, would you? He doesn't have a suit. That would be terrible. Alex Yu has initiated a station-wide lockdown, and the only way to get back into the main body of the station is to go through Cargo Bay B to reach life support, to cut through a series of subsections of Talos 1 to get into the reactor control room to reboot the entire system so that the lockdown can be lifted. But the cargo bay is occupied by a number of Typhon phantoms roaming about in the dark areas. It sure would be nice to get the lights on, to restore power to the machinery and to clear the phantoms, wouldn't it? Get rid of that spooky ambiance. And there's a number of survivors holding up in the cargo bay. Security Chief Elazar asks for help in restoring power to the fabricator, getting fabrication plans for turrets from her security office, and in getting turrets to defend the group and clear out the Typhon that are lurking just beyond the safety doors protecting the survivors. And in this adventure, Morgan does all of those things and buffs up the security of this group of survivors before continuing on to Cargo Bay B alone, where the life support department is located. Traveling through this area, Morgan can bypass Alex's lockdown by getting into the reactor control room to reboot the system. It's nice and easy, but while in life support, somebody contacts you who is struggling. A would-be familiar voice if Morgan Yu's memory wasn't eviscerated. It's Michaela Ilyushin, a once girlfriend of Morgan Yu in life. Michaela Ilyushin's father was a Soviet Union cosmonaut who somehow landed in the Talos 1 volunteer program. You know, the people who were subjected to Typhon neuromod research, people who were generally death row inmates. Her father was imprisoned for political reasons, and Michaela took a position as a systems engineer aboard Talos 1 to find him, except Michaela cannot receive neuromods due to paraplexis. This should have disqualified her from taking the job, but she concealed her paraplexis by falsifying her medical records, and she went on to receive neuromods. And now, she is stuck near the reactor controls, struggling to breathe as she's not been able to get a booster shot to stave off her disease. Time is not on Michaela's side, but even as she struggles to breathe, Michaela guides Morgan to the reactor control room. It is a long stretch, riddled with corpses and assorted Typhon blocking the way forward. Michaela is hiding in a locked office, and as soon as Morgan enters the office, Michaela starts explaining what is wrong with her and how Morgan can proceed to lift the lockdown. She is extremely helpful, despite the dire situation. She doesn't try to bargain anything, and in this case, thankfully because of some lucky searching before encountering Michaela, Morgan Yu already has her medication on hand and is able to restore Michaela to full health, at least for now. Whew, that was a long stretch. The reactor control booth is at the bottom of a long descent, but if I may say, the nightmare showing up here was just plain malicious, and the actual process for rebooting the system is a right pain in the keister, and a little bit spooky too, and I feel like the technopaths and corrupted operators appearing to muck with the electronics was just a bit cruel. And even with all these trials thrown at her at once, Morgan manages to handle it. The system is brought back online and the lockdown is lifted, and we were all left a little more salty in the process. With the lockdown lifted, Alex Yu contacts his sibling once again, asking Morgan to go to his office in the Arboretum to hear him out, to see the truth, and from there Morgan can decide what to do. Alex will not stand in their way anymore. Remember, this is all a test. It's very convenient. Choices already made with no context will have later consequences, but the final stretch of choices will wield the greatest impact. With the lifts restored, Michaela and Deo Igwe will be able to meet with Morgan Yu at her office when she is ready, where January is skulking about, and the survivors in the cargo bay are able to leave the cargo bay to seek out an escape route. Everything is going fine. See, everything is fine. Just ignore the insane Typhon threat on the station that just keeps escalating. How even did they make it to Morgan's office in one piece? But they did. They made it. But Morgan detours to her brother's office in the Arboretum to hear him out and learn what he claims to be the truth. And what's waiting is a video, supposedly from the year 2035, of Morgan and Alex together. And it's up to each of us to decide if what we're being told is a tall tale or not, but this does not feel like an authentic video. It feels like a form of manipulation, and I could be wrong. I could just be positioned to oppose anyone who pretends to know the right way to handle the situation at this point. But in the video, Morgan and Alex stand together, united in their desire to complete their research together. Morgan does not seem troubled in any way. She seems to be fully aware of what's taking place around her. Alex presents as though Morgan is the dominating mind, and he is just carrying out her wishes. And this doesn't appear to be the apartment simulation that we experienced at the start of the simulation. I don't trust it. Morgan is too free, too lucid, and Alex is acting too passively. What Alex wants to accomplish now is what we would know as the October Directive. Do you remember the first operator that the real Morgan built? Operator October was programmed to guide Morgan towards detonating a large null wave transmitter, big enough that it could kill any Typhon on the ship while leaving Talos 1 itself intact, saving everyone on board and preserving their discoveries. So in this case, Morgan decides to set off the null wave transmitter to follow Alex's instructions. First up is to get a scan of the coral node on the exterior of the ship for Alex to study. And as soon as Morgan exits the ship to get that scan, January starts harping on about purpose and choices and what Morgan needs to do. It makes it hard to sift through all the bullcrap and form an opinion on anything when there's two sides playing word games. Typhon Morgan instead decides that regardless of who it serves, whatever choices save the most lives and causes the least amount of harm will be the choices that she pursues. January and Alex can go fuck themselves. And it would seem that the TranStar Board of Directors are privy to what is taking place on Talos 1, and a ship has launched to investigate the situation, which means Father William Yu is aware of his children's potential failures. There's not a lot of time left before TranStar reinforcements arrive on the station, and who knows what will happen once they land. It will probably be messy, and Alex does not want to give up control over Talos 1. He wants Morgan to hurry up so that they can maintain the upper hand over whoever may be arriving. Morgan gets the scan as soon as possible and hoofs it back to Alex's office, but... oh boy. The upload is halted. Intercept protocols come into effect from the TranStar reinforcements that have already arrived. The board of directors has authorized a man named Walter Dahl to take control of Talos 1. And Dahl is bad news. It would be more accurate to call him a mercenary. Dahl is under orders from William Yu to collect and secure all technology and research related to the Typhon neuromods, in particular anything related to Project Cobalt. Cobalt was the proposed project of putting human neuromods into Typhon, but it was denied resources for study by Alex Yu, which means somebody has been leaking information or has already sent out an SOS. Can't honestly say that I blame anyone for doing that, given the absolute stink all of this has caused. But Dahl is going to secure it by any means necessary, and he is going to exterminate all human personnel in the process. This is a cleanup mission. No one gets out. Complicated family dynamics, right? William Yu is presented as a pure villain within the simulation. That's not to say that he wasn't in real life, but damn, tough break for the crew of Talos 1. And, of course, it would seem that the best course of action would be to kill Dahl and all of his operator machines, but instead, Deo Igwe contacts Morgan and presents an alternative. Dahl uses fresh neuromods before particularly gruesome missions, so that upon return he can remove them, forget what carnage he brought, and just wake up richer with no memories to haunt him. Instead of killing Dahl, Morgan could subdue him, secure him, and Deo Igwe will remove whatever neuromods he needs to roll his memory back to before William Yu sent him to Talos 1, and then they can use Dahl as a pilot, convince him that he needs to take all the survivors with him as a part of his mission, and then lives will be saved. And in this case, regardless of how Alex or January feels about the process, Typhon Morgan Yu does exactly as Deo Igwe asks. Save the most lives possible, do the least amount of harm. Walter Dahl is hunted by Morgan in Talos 1 and subdued, and Igwe performs beautifully. Dahl's memory is rolled back, and Igwe convinces him that he's on a rescue mission to save William Yu's precious research personnel and his children from Talos 1. In fact, Dahl is insistent on getting the task underway. Oh, which reminds me, here's a little diversion from the story for a moment. I admittedly did not find the truth on this matter, but someone on Talos 1 sabotaged the escape pods. They couldn't be launched. As per a shuttle bay engineer, I'm not supposed to tell anyone about this, but I wanted you to know since you're someone that I really care about. The escape pods don't work. If there's ever an emergency on the station, don't try to use them. However, I'm working on rigging one of them to work. Don't tell anyone. The knee-jerk reaction is to accuse Alex Yu, as he is the one that has a personal escape pod. That email was sent prior to the Typhon breach. But could it be an even deeper conspiracy? Could the TranStar Board of Directors mandated a no-escape policy? That's quite sick, isn't it? But I'm a sucker for a conspiracy. Perhaps it's wiser to place blame on a single knowable person rather than a faceless corporation. But given that a mercenary was sent with black box military operators in tow to kill everyone on sight, I'm rather convinced that this place was to be a death trap from the very start. Oh, I wonder what happened in the real year of 2035. But returning to the story as we are approaching the finale. With the survivors safe or on their way to safety, it's time to focus on Talos 1 and the fate of the station. And finally, Typhon Morgan has a face-to-face conversation with Alex Yu at his office in the Arboretum. He's been hiding away in his own personal safe room all this time while things went to hell outside. But he's clearly not a soldier, not the most empathetic of people. Interesting, given what he's trying to implant into a Typhon in the real world now. Alex Yu offers his arming key. If Typhon Morgan is hell-bent on blowing up the station, then he will not stand in her way. But he makes another attempt to sway Morgan against it, for no reason other than to keep their research and proof of their genius discoveries. No one would take credit for their work. Kill all the Typhon on board with the Null wave transmitter instead. Alex confirms that the coral is indeed a neural network, and it's broadcasting something out into the stars. But who is listening? What are the Typhon aboard the ship telling them? Alex has fabrication plans for a null wave transmitter that will hijack the neural network and kill all the Typhon receiving information from it. Pretty cool, but we're not left wondering for long. Who has been getting data from the coral neural network? From the depths of space comes something called the Apex, the biggest and the baddest of the Typhon, at least that we're aware of within the simulation. The Apex begins to crush parts of Talos 1. The Arboretum is immediately compromised, and here yet is another choice. Save an unconscious Alex Yu from suffocation or leave him to die in zero gravity. In this case, Typhon Morgan goes back for Alex and gets him to safety back in his safe room. Morgan Yu now has both arming keys needed to blow up the ship and the plans needed to kill the Typhon infesting the ship. And it is certainly no mystery as to what she chooses. Destroying Talos 1 is not an option, not because of research and technology, but because the graveyard that is this ship should remain as proof that these people were here and their lives were stolen away. What survivors that remain who couldn't make it to the shuttle bay do not deserve to be snuffed out. And Morgan Yu deserves better than this fate. No one is going to be taken out in some grand explosion. Morgan Yu builds the null wave transmitter and takes it to the heart of the coral within Psychotronics. In a final attempt to stop Typhon Morgan Yu, the simulation is interrupted again with a vision.
You better do something. The reconstruction is destabilizing. They're lying to you. Hurry.
Lady, almost no one has told the whole truth this entire simulation. Way to state the obvious, Typhon voice lady. Everyone has been lying about everything. Morgan makes it back to the ship control deck, where Alex Yu and January await. Shooting that robot felt so good, and there's no hesitation in the choice made here. Now it's time for the final judgment. The simulation has been completed. This Typhon that we are has shown to be very empathetic and intent on preserving human life. No Typhon neuromods were installed. Michaela Ilyushin was saved, as was Deo Igwe. The survivors in the cargo bay were helped, making it possible for them to find an escape route. Dahl was not killed and instead provided safe transport away from Talos 1 for all survivors who could reach his private ship. And the Typhon went out of its way to avoid killing mind-controlled humans. As a result, in this case, the Typhon called Morgan is extended a hand and asked to be a bridge between the Typhon and humanity. A turn in the horror story that has consumed Earth. And in this case, Morgan accepts this proposition.